I guess that's, well, not a lot happened in the last part. All we really did was cover the game that pretty much changed the world, so, no biggie. We're now in 2002, and GTA is everywhere, splashed on the front pages of magazines, making mums and dads tut in disapproval, and sticking a blood-soaked baseball bat slap bang in the middle of your cornflakes. Rockstar were already at the top, but they weren't about to rest on their laurels. Only a year passed between the third game and the sequel, with a quick stop-off for State of Emergency, a rather crap budget title that still sold well because hey, it was all about causing chaos and that was just the flavour of the month. But it wouldn't be all that long before hype started for Vice City. It wasn't necessarily presented as something totally new, with promises of much the same fun and all of that, but there would be a twist. The game was going to go back in time. Grand Theft Auto Vice City takes full advantage of the house's love of sticking all the films and TV and whatever the hell they love in a mixing bowl and seeing what happens. Sod the present day, the game's going to take place in 1986. And, as the title suggests, it's set in a place called Vice City, which so happens to be the GTA universe's version of Miami. Again, circa the mid-80s, so, you get the picture. If GTA 3 was the pioneer, Vice City is the victory lap, the big 5-minute success montage at the end of the second act, set to push it to the limit, a celebration of all things 1980s American culture, draped in neon and covered in cocaine. Name any popular crime film or TV show of the era, and chances are there's a tribute to it somewhere in this game. In particular, there's the whole main storyline of a criminal outsider coming to the town, seeing the shining land of opportunity, and taking it for every stinking cent. You play as Tommy Vercetti, a mafioso type from Liberty who's just spent a few years inside for the family. The Forellis drop him in Vice City so he can explore new opportunities, aka just get him out of the way. But his first deal goes drastically wrong, and he ends up in the bad books of the Forellis, with nought but an uber-paranoid lawyer and a bunch of untrustworthy criminals for company. So what do? You go out on your own. First you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women. So it goes. Before even getting into anything else about the game, it's kind of a must to go into what inspired it. It may well have been presented almost like an expansion pack to GTA 3, almost as if it was a quick trip down a side street to fulfill the house's big ol' 80s lob on, but Vice City ended up being so much more than that. The way it threw all of these cross-media influences into a game kinda makes it the video game equivalent to Pulp Fiction. What GTA 3 did for gameplay, Vice City did for story. And naturally, a lot of it goes back to one film in particular. Oh my god, yes. Those big mounds of glory. It all goes back to Scarface. So before really hitting Vice City, let's just get in the mood. So, once a classic early 30s cautionary tale of life in the mob based on the life of Al Capone, remaking Scarface became the pet project of Al Pacino back in the early 80s, and he would do so with the help of a director who was already well known for lurid and violent films, and a scriptwriter who was at the time going through his own relationship with cocaine. The result? A glorious, over-the-top, ultra-violent criminal epic covering the rise and fall of Tony Montana, a Cuban emigre who built an empire on the back of white powder. He survives setups, gets revenge on his boss, buys up half of Miami, becomes paranoid as hell due to coke abuse, fucks with his even bigger boss, ends up killing his own partner, and finally goes down in a blaze of glory as the camera pans up to a globe saying, "The world is yours." The TLDR version of Scarface is, simply put, just like Elvira says, never use your own supply. Scarface hit in 1983 to, well, a mixed reception. It did fine at the box office, but a lot of critics dismissed it as a schlocky, unnecessarily violent and disgusting B-movie, and although it is one of his most iconic and greatest roles, at the time the film didn't do a whole lot to reignite the great Pacino's then flagging career. That would come a bit later, around about the time he returned to some other character that he played a couple of times. However, the movie did have a few champions, most notably every gamer's favourite critic, the late great Roger Ebert.
It's rated R. It is a violent movie. It's very tough and rough and not appropriate for younger audiences, but it's also a very good movie, and the violence isn't for exploitation. It's an important part of this story, and it's a good movie, I think.
You know, it's funny, I didn't like the movie at all.
And Martin Scorsese, who on seeing it famously remarked to Stephen Bauer, who played Manny in the film, that you guys are great, but be prepared because they're gonna hate it in Hollywood, because it's about them. 30 years later, Scarface has continued to survive and thrive, influencing a whole ton of media across the board, from films to TV, even to games that aren't this one, to games that are actually officially based on it, and even to music, where Scarface serves as a cornerstone in gangster rap mythology, an icon, something to live up to but something to be wary of, the story of an immigrant, a minority, rising up from nothing entirely on his own, no matter how, being an inspiration.
What type of an entrepreneur, you have your own business and you're working hard, a lot of the homies can relate to that whole phrase, the world is mine, you know what I mean?
Scarface could fill up 30 minutes all on its own, and for various reasons it is one of my favourite movies of all time. And you know what? If you watch the documentary Cocaine Cowboys, and you damn well should, you'll see that, in the words of Kurt Vonnegut, who detested the film, all of this happened more or less. So why do I choose to go into such detail about Scarface? Because as it happens, it is quite important. Vice City would not exist without Scarface. It's not just a case of saying that Vice City was influenced by Scarface. Vice City is essentially a retelling of Scarface, as close as Rockstar could get to making a Scarface game without actually using the license. All of the major plot points from the film that I just mentioned, they happen in Vice City too. Sometimes they have their own spin, a lot of the time they're just played straight. Tommy Vercetti does it all. He even ends up living in a mansion that's pretty much exactly like Tony Montana's house. Hell, it even has this room in it that's just flat out cribbed from the movie. It's Lopez's office. So just what was it that drove the houses towards Scarface? Who can say? We've already mentioned their media gratitude before, and you could see the little signs such as an entire radio station in GTA 3 being devoted to songs from the Scarface soundtrack, but this is something else. No video game inspires Vice City as much as Scarface does, and it provides a concrete template for the series going forward. For the foreseeable future, every GTA game takes more influence from films and TV than it does from other games, for better or worse. Even the secondary influences from film and TV, such as Miami Vice, Goodfellas, Carlito's Way and other assorted films, they hold more influence over the game than other games do, which in those days was a little unusual. Indeed, GTA openly has little time for other video games. It's going along another path entirely, and other games aren't welcome alongside it. Such is life when you're basically at the top, and Vice City would be as big a confirmation of that as you could possibly get. The game was a massive success, critically adored just as the first game was. Oh, and it also sold over 20 million copies, making it one of the biggest selling games on the PS2. If you didn't know that GTA was kin already, you sure as hell knew it now. Of course, I have kind of glossed over one of the most important things here. Tommy Vercetti is the first GTA protagonist who has a speaking part. Vercetti is played by Ray Liotta, a big stunt casting that could have easily been picked just for that big Goodfellas inclusion, but Liotta is pretty damn great as Tommy Vercetti, so it's just a win all round. Vercetti is basically surrounded by wall-to-wall assholes. Ken Rosenberg, his paranoid lawyer friend, Manuel Diaz, a coked-up criminal mastermind who makes him run around doing errands, the ever-obnoxious and thoroughly cockney Kent Paul, naturally played by Danny Dyer, and of course his friends in the north. The only person who ever seems to be on his side is Lance Vance, who eagerly partners up with Tommy at the first opportunity. They make for a quite neat bizarro version of Crockett and Tubbs. Voice talent is basically superb and quite star-studded across the board, but Liotta is the undoubted king of it all. His delivery and pitch-perfect lines, especially his constant grumbling early on, make him so much fun to play as, and go a long way into making Tommy Vercetti one of the most memorable GTA protagonists. He's an odd one in that he exists in kind of a middle ground. After this game, basically all the major GTA protagonists get several layers of character thrown onto them. Rockstar try to make them deep and complex characters, with varying degrees of success. Tommy doesn't really have that. He's still kind of in the Claude mould in that we pretty much know from the outset that he just wants to take over, and his character is basically psycho who likes to go around and kill people. The later game's attempts at creating more complex characters are very much appreciated even if they aren't always successful, but I can definitely see why some people do prefer the unapologetic, straight ahead sort of deal that we've got here. You won't find any of that good old ludonarrative dissonance here, no siree. Tommy Vercetti ritualistically bashing an ambulance driver's face in with a 9-iron is perfectly in line with his character. His motivation is that he simply couldn't allow someone to undo his handiwork. The game itself, technically speaking, is largely the same as ever, albeit with a few neat additions. Bikes are included for the first time, and they can be damn fun to ride around in, even if the typically jittery GTA controls make it damn hard at points. You also get an in-game map for the first time, making it easier than ever to ride around. But largely it's all the same, but tightened up quite a bit. Gunplay is still the same, but the auto-aim feels a lot better than it was before, which is quite nice. And there's now a whole load of variation in the weapons. You now get several different types of pistol, shotgun, SMG, rifle and what have you, all of which make for very fun times indeed. But a really awesome thing is the inclusion of a whole load of different hand-to-hand weapons, including, for that very classic 80s Scarface feel, a chainsaw that'll skin your ass raw. It is at the very least a close second to the almighty golf club. And I daren't leave out the samurai sword, the hammer, the screwdriver. Mob dudes in movies have always been known for their exceptional creativity when it comes to hurting people with anything they can pick up from the hardware store, and I feel that Rockstar have been very faithful to that indeed. A lot of this stuff comes into play in the missions themselves, which are now thoroughly fantastic. They can be quite hard, but so many of these missions are just a riot. I keep bashing on the golf theme, but there's nothing like chasing a guy around a course in a golf cart while listening to Latin music, a pitch-perfect shunt knocking them straight into the lake. Talk about a one-stroke penalty, am I right? Okay, that's enough golf. How about glorious boat chasers, Miami Vice style, or a big junkyard shootout, or stealing a tank from the frickin' military, or just about any of the chaotic cruises around the streets of Vice that you get into? The brilliance just doesn't really stop. Side missions are also even more of a thing now. There's more optional side projects than there are main story missions, as you take over the whole city through acquiring property left, right and centre. They're just as important as the story missions are, and further add to the feeling of this being a glorious sandbox where you can do pretty much anything you want. And with that in mind, everything falls back to the true star of Vice City, the city itself. Rockstar nailed it in this regard. Again, if the third game was the beginning of something special, Vice City is where it becomes magic. There's so many things to just go around and marvel at. Even now, over 10 years later, when you would expect the cracks in a game like this to be showing, the art style and aesthetic of Vice City just has something. It's not a perfect recreation of Miami, but then it was never meant to be. It was always a condensed and slightly skewered play on things that was designed purely for good old-fashioned entertainment. Chasing and cruising are both fun as hell in equal measures here, especially when you've got that radio to boot. No more somewhat unknown songs, Vice City is also the first GTA to feature a soundtrack largely consisting of songs that everybody knows. Success will do that to you. The soundtrack is mostly an 80s greatest hits compilation with commercials, but damn if they didn't go ahead and pick all the good ones. Two Tribes, Sister Christian, More Than This, All Night Long, The Message, Poison Arrow, Japanese Boy, Stepping Out, Susudio, a great song, personal favourite, Out of Touch, Love Missile, Peace Sells, Africa and so on until you get to frickin' Wow by Kate Bush and you realise that even though this game features barely any original music, it's still worthy of being called one of the greatest game soundtracks ever made. These songs aren't just there for kicks, they add so much. It feels like every one of them was carefully selected. Now obviously this doesn't surprise me. A hipster sort of company like Rockstar would always be sure to choose the coolest 80s tracks, going on the edge of being dorky without falling in. I mean, you're not going to find any Paul Young here, that's for sure. But still, it's amazing. There's also the usual comedy chat as well, if you honestly feel like playing this game without listening to the frickin' soundtrack because, well, I've no idea why you'd want to do that. Actually, the VCPR station is kind of amusing, but a lot of the episodes are around 30 minutes long, which is kind of a bit much, because I mean, you're never going to spend close to that long in a car. So what does it say about the game when something like that is one of the biggest problems I can think of about it? Vice City is, for a fair few people, the high point of the whole GTA series, and although it isn't quite that for me, it's certainly not a statement I'd disagree with. The game is, quite simply, everything good about the third game, but better and with an 80s filter. And yeah, that is just as good as it sounds. Ever since Vice City, there's been a whole subsector of games, even media in general, that deals with the whole 80s filter thing. from riffs on already established titles like Double Dragon Neon or Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, to original creations like Hotline Miami. I'd even go ahead and include the music of Kavinsky here. I mean, he did name one of his albums Out One after all. As good as a lot of this stuff is, I don't think any of it has ever quite managed to surpass Vice City. This is from a period where GTA not only cast its right eye over media and culture and trends and what have you, it also set those trends. For all of violence and game stuff and what have you, it was a front runner. Vice City is a part of the series' peak, and as a game it will never be forgotten. And let's not forget just how successful GTA 3 was. Rockstar were already at a point where they could have done anything. They could have just put a neon filter over GTA 3, released it, and people would have still lapped it up. But they went beyond that. The only job that Vice City ever had was to be a triumph. And it was, in the absolute best possible way. Again, you have to ask where on earth they could have gone from here. You've done New York, you've gone to Miami. Maybe, just maybe then, it's time to go west. If you want to get even deeper into all things media and excess, maybe you have to go right to its very heart. But again, that's a story for the next video. Much like GTA 3 before it, Vice City would be revisited later on in handheld form through the efforts of Rockstar leads. Vice City stories would follow hot on the heels of Liberty City stories, taking place a couple of years before the events of Vice City and putting you in the shoes of old Tubbs himself, the ever-cool Lance Vance's brother Victor, who is a much more straight-laced guy who joins the army but then goes ahead and gets himself involved in a lot of shit, so cue a plot filled with corrupt army officers, wife-beating rednecks, oh, and Phil Collins. Yes, Phil fucking Collins. Oh, you might just meet your brother along the way. Anyway, the main job of the game was to provide more manna from heaven for those who wanted a fix of GTA on their PSPs, but like Liberty City Stories, it was also ported to the PS2, and again, that's the version that we're going to be looking at. Vice City Stories is actually kind of an unheralded game, relatively speaking. It came out quite late on, not even appearing on PS2 until 2007, so it is also kind of GTA's little farewell to the system that basically made it. Strange that we're looking at it before we're even finished with the PS2 games then, but there you are. Vice City Stories is actually a lot more grounded than the original, which just went straight into full-on 80s excess right from the start. Victor's beginnings involve an army base, being an unwilling mule, and then getting dishonourably discharged, before falling more and more into crime for a bunch of guys operating from a trailer park. It kinda goes more into Vice City's poor underbelly. Naturally, big clubs, neon lights and white powder will become a thing, but not until later on. You kick off doing shit mostly for characters who are, well, just utterly reprehensible and monstrous, to be honest. I mean, at least you get to kill most of them. Victor himself is one of the absolute straightest GTA protagonists around. He has no criminal history, he wants to get paid clean. He's, that sort of GTA protagonist, you know, the one who gets pulled into the criminal underworld. Kinda feels like a dry one for Nico Bellic, only without the soporific monologues. Kinda like Liberty City Stories beforehand, it's trickier to grasp the main influences that drive the game beyond what was already there, and to be honest, the story this time around does feel like a little bit of nothing. It's a rather downbeat and straight story that just so happens to include Phil motherfucking Collins. One thing I do feel a little about Vice City Stories is that, a little while after releasing the first game, Rockstar suddenly thought, shit, we didn't include In the Air Tonight in the soundtrack. And so they made another game entirely based around that. Not that this is necessarily a bad thing, to be honest. It's still GTA and it's still very cool to spend time in a place as good as Vice City, and a lot of the key elements, such as a particularly awesome soundtrack obviously, are still there and still essential. The gameplay doesn't take as big a jump from Vice City as Liberty City Stories did from GTA 3, but it is a little bit tighter when it comes to things like driving and whatnot. Mind you, cars always seem to be going a little crazy in this game. The PS2 port is also a bit better this time round too. Whereas Liberty City Stories often really seemed to chug along, this game runs a lot smoother. The only issue is that the way the game loads textures seems to be a bit out of whack, meaning that you do get a little bit of pop-up every now and again. It seems to take the odd element here and there from the next game that we're covering, although this time round it just mostly seems to be animations and sounds and what have you. Oh, and did I mention that the game features Phil frickin' bastard fuck mothering Collins as Phil Collins? I probably did mention it. On the whole, Vice City Stories is, well, it's okay. It is a bit more bearable to play on the actual PS2 this time out, although it is probably better if you play it on a handheld. However, Liberty City Stories, yeah, it just does feature a more fun protagonist than this guy, and to be honest, more fun missions. It's not a bad game at all, it's just a little bit boring in places, and honestly the whole trailer trash thing at the start goes on for so damn long that you end up like a Wailing Millhouse, just wanting to get to the fireworks factory already. For various reasons, Vice City Stories is the least remembered of all the 3D GTA games, partly because of how late it came out in the life of the PS2, but also because it's just kind of average for a GTA title. All that said, it is more stuff in Vice City, and for some that can just about excuse anything. And with that, we leave Vice City behind. The one question before we finish is, will GTA ever go back to Vice City again? It's kind of in an odd space as this pure 80s creation. Obviously we're going to go back to Liberty City at some point, and we'll certainly be seeing our next destination a lot too. But what about Vice? We know that the series does like to freshen itself up a little before each game, taking their old settings and refurbishing them on a grand frickin' scale, but it's kind of hard to imagine a present day Vice City because the whole thing is just so tied into the original's 1980s love letter. Who knows? We shall see. For now though, we have to go west. All the way to the place where 24 dreams are broken every second, where the one turn can kill you, where you see the Vinewood sign from your stoop in the ghetto, so long as the smog's not too bad. Welcome to Los Santos, and with it, San Andreas. But that's all going to happen next time. So, I'll see you then. Bye!